Praise be Jesus Christ and Mary Immaculate. Welcome to this 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. We're going to read from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, verses 24 to 32. Chapter 13 of the Gospel of Mark is a very challenging chapter. The evangelist knows this. He knows this so well that in the 14th chapter, before he begins to talk about the tribulations and the sufferings that are going to come about, he actually adds, "Let the reader understand." Let's try to understand what he is trying to tell us. In this passage, Jesus describes a time after a great tribulation, referring to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which was the center of all Jewish life. He uses the words of the prophets, especially of Isaiah, to speak about the end times of the end of the oppressive powers. Jesus says, "The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light." The sun and the moon, two of the great stars in the heaven. In ancient cultures, the sun and the moon were worshipped as gods by the pagan nations. But here, Jesus is showing that these two false gods, and any false gods, or any person who makes themselves like God, will lose their power. Why? Because Jesus has said earlier that the good news of the kingdom of God must be proclaimed to every nation. No longer is there a need for false gods. This proclamation brings true light, the light of God, the light of God's presence amongst his people, and it overshadows all false expectations. Jesus continues, "The stars will fall from the sky." In those days, rulers and kings and emperors were seen almost as divine, like stars in the heaven. Isn't it true that we call our celebrities the stars? I mean, we have Dancing with the Stars, Singing Like the Stars. We have the star-studded event. We call these people stars because we look up to them. We like to shine in their light. They're almost like divine. Jesus is telling us that with the coming of his message, these powerful figures who rely on false divinity will begin to fall just like the stars. Here Jesus recalls Isaiah's prophecy against the king of Babylon, who once said, "I will ascend to heaven, only to be brought down." The good news of Jesus is a message of liberation for all people. Any power built on human domination and control will eventually fall. When Jesus speaks of the powers in the heavens being shaken, he is talking about those who falsely claim divine authority, who think themselves as the messiahs, as the saviors, as if God literally sent them or put them there. Then Jesus assures us, they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with great power and glory. This means that the glory and the power of the true God will shine forth in Jesus. Those who live according to God's way will see this, and the oppressive leaders will be shaken. The image of the fig tree is given to us. The image of the fig tree that Jesus gives next is a symbol of the religious institution. Early in the gospel, Jesus spoke of a fig tree that looked healthy, it looked good, it was full of leaves, but bore no fruit. In the same way, Jesus warns about systems that seem strong but are spiritually empty. He encourages his community saying, "When you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near." The fall of Jerusalem and the temple, Jesus says, will allow the good news to be spread to all nations, no longer a nationalistic religion. This is the beginning of God's kingdom. Jesus promises this, that this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And we know that Jerusalem fell in the year 70 and the temple has never been rebuilt. Jesus assures us, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Every unjust system will eventually collapse because, as Jesus reminds us, all human powers are fragile. The passage closes with Jesus saying, "But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father." This refers to the day of Jesus' own death and to the moment of persecution for his followers. Jesus tells us not to worry about the exact time, but to trust that it is in the hands of the Father, that we are in the hands of the Father. Especially when we're suffering tribulation, we are in the hands of the Father. This is a message of trust and not of fear. Jesus encourages us to have faith that God is working even when we feel powerless in the face of oppressive powers. The gospel message is one of hope and of liberation, especially for the small, the faithful community that might feel helpless against the powers of the world. Jesus reminds us that God's kingdom will always prevail. How do we apply this lesson in our daily lives? We can begin by noticing where we place our trust. In whom do we place our trust? Do we rely on worldly powers or temporary solutions? Or do we ground ourselves in God's enduring love? Each time we feel uncertain or powerlessness in our lives, we have an opportunity to turn to God, to find strength in God's presence. Powerlessness equals trust in God. That's the only way out. Powerlessness, recognizing God, and turning our lives and our will over to a God who really does care for us. By seeking God's wisdom in prayer and by remaining faithful to his word, we allow the light of Christ to shine through us, even in a world that is often feels uncertain. Let's live each day with the assurance that God's kingdom is near, working quietly through our trust, through our actions, and our openness to his grace. I'll leave you with this reflection question. In what areas of your life do you feel powerless? And how might you find strength in trusting God's timing and presence during those moments? God bless you.